Good morning. Welcome to ETOA's webinar on Paris 2024. My name's Tim Fairhurst. I'm going to wait for 20-30 seconds whilst our guests join us, but we're already joined here with our panelists who I'll ask to introduce themselves shortly. So I'll give it a little while for people to join us and then we'll begin. Thank you. Okay, the number of participants has stabilized. Lots of people joining us this morning. Thank you. I'd like to introduce very briefly those that you're looking at in the screen. Corinne Menegot from Paris Je t'aime. So the city's tourism office, but really looking at the city more generally. She'll be speaking first. Tom Jenkins will be familiar to many of you, ETOA's CEO, and David Edwards, who is ETOA's research consultant, but he also worked for Visit Britain during the time of London 2012. So he's very well placed to offer some insights as to what happened in that strange city north of Paris, the other side of the water. So the purpose of this webinar is various. Partly it's about what's going to happen next year. None of us have a crystal ball, but a lot of work has been done to plan and to make all kinds of interesting new activities available for next year. But the impact of big events, whether they're the Olympics or other things, on leisure tourism is, broadly speaking, well known. Paris has done a lot of work to anticipate the changing pattern of behavior during the year. So Corinne's going to share some of those sorts of insights, and David is going to share what actually happened in London, and we'll see to what extent that provides a useful insight for discussing how next year is going to work out for leisure tourism in particular. More broadly, Paris is a very important city for long-haul business as well as intra-European, and how the city works from a tourism perspective, whether or not the Olympics are taking place, is a matter of great interest to all of us, whether it's to do with product diversification, how do attractions work, what sorts of things will visitors be doing in Paris in coming years that's different than what they do now, and what role do destination managers play in supporting that change, and by implication, how can we, the travel trade, work collaboratively with our destination partners in order to give a better experience to clients and make the city a great place to visit and live in as well. So all sorts of things possible over the next however long we've got. I'd like to draw your attention to a function called Q&A. So those of you who are in the audience, you'll see Q&A at the bottom of your screen, just slightly to the left. If you type a question, please keep it short. I'll be monitoring those as we go along, and as appropriate, I will share those with the panel. Some of you have also shared some thoughts ahead of time. I know those are going to be covered by the prepared remarks, but thank you for the questions you submitted in advance. That's all from me. I'm now going to invite Corinne to take the floor and give us an idea of what's in store for us in Paris next year. Corinne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So hello to everyone. I'm happy to be here to share the thoughts that we have and everything we're expecting for the next year, which is an important year for us. So I will share some slides, but feel free just to ask any question or what you want along the presentation maybe. Pretty sure that, is it working? That's fine for everyone. But please feel free to just ask your question along the presentation. That will be probably easier. I don't know, Tim, if you're okay with that.
That's fine. I'll keep an eye on the Q&A as you go along.
Okay. So let's talk about the Olympics. So sorry, because this is in French, but after that it's all in English, so no problem. But you can see the numbers, so I think that's fine for everyone anyway, in any language. So of course, the 2024 Olympics are getting closer every day. So we know it's coming, and so we've got quite a lot of things to do yet. And I'm pretty sure that you have quite a lot of questions, but this is really important for Paris. We will go back on the different impacts that we have, and I have some figures to share with you. But what's important for us is probably the look that will be held on the destination. So everything about attractiveness of a destination. We're very much focusing on hospitality and how we can get a collective movement on hospitality, maybe for this occasion, but also, of course, economic issues. And what's most important, probably the legacy of all that, because it's not so much the timing of the Olympic, which is important, but everything that will be done in this destination and that will be held for afterwards. So everything about heritage and legacy afterwards. So maybe to begin, some quick insights about the Olympics. So, everyone knows that it's a lot of people, 15 million spectators for the whole thing. I will come back to the different things afterwards, but what's not so much probably known and not so easy just to deal with from an intuitive point of view is that we're expecting about 16 million visitors in the whole France, 15 million in Paris, Île-de-France, in the region. But what's interesting is probably the people without tickets, which is not so obvious at the beginning. So that means on that 15 millions, 12 millions of people will be without tickets, just people coming from the happiness of the games, participating in the celebrations and everything, but not with a ticket to go to see something very specific about the Olympics. And which is also very important, it's probably the numbers of people from international. So you see the Paralympics and the Olympics. Of course, national attendance is the key one. So we will be probably around 80-85% of people coming from national territory and only 15% coming from international, which is not so obvious at the beginning, because when we expect the Olympics, we just say this is international, but obviously this is not really the case. And it's completely corroborated by the numbers of tickets which have been sold already by Paris 2024, and that's probably in line, and David will confirm probably, but with the figures of London at that time, and Tom also. But this is something we've got to be aware of. And on the national attendance, 50% will be probably from very much the suburbs and Paris itself, so the region Île-de-France, and the other one will be from the national territory. So that means on the international people, you see the different demographics, not very big surprises, but of course Europe is one of the key destination coming to Paris at that time, with United States, which has been the first foreign attendance for the past couple months and years now. So coming back quite quickly in Paris, essentially, but also in France. So it's very much 55%, as I was saying, Europeans, and 44% from long-haul destination. Not so surprising. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's working. In terms of occupation rate, because this is really something we're very much questioned about. Do we have enough hotels, rooms, and apartments and whatever? So these figures are an analysis and estimation rate that we've been doing about the numbers of people coming, taking some different length of stay for international, big international, European, and of course, national, and people who are from the region itself, so who are not staying at the hotel. And obviously, even in the high scenario, if we take the Paris region and every neighboring hotel park that we have, quite very close to the Olympic sites, we're pretty much at a 75% on the high scenario rate, which is obviously very much acceptable. So we won't have any problems with that. The only thing that could be an issue is probably the hotels or the everything which is very close and near to the Olympic site, because of course you will want, and people will want to be very close. But according to the transportation and everything, I think it will be fine, and we can definitely manage that. And obviously for the Paralympics, that will be much much less. I think we are at 50% in terms of high scenarios occupation rate. And probably I will come back to the prices afterwards, because probably that will be the main issue that we have. And so we're working hard on that. So probably you will have some questions on that. Before that, just a quick overlook on the difference probably of profile of the visitors coming for the Olympics. Not exactly the same behavior that the usual tourist, I would say, that comes to Paris usually. The demand is probably more about festivities, less cultural activities. So we have an issue on that, and I know London had an issue on that. That was not the most beautiful summer in terms of touristic point of view. So this is really something that we also have to have in mind. And the behavior in terms of budget on the other hand is very interesting, because usually an Olympic tourist spends twice as much as a normal tourist, but very much in terms of gastronomy, restauration, housing, and shopping, things like that, not so much in terms of cultural activities. And the question, I would say, this is a question for you guys. What will happen in the first semester for 2024? Is there a crowding out effect or not? We don't know yet. That was not so much the case in London, which is probably the things that the city that we're referring to in terms of comparison. But as the Games of Paris are very much focused on the heart of the city, it may have some impacts till after probably April or May or something like that. So this is something I will be very happy to discuss with you, because you're the ones dealing with the demand for the first semester, but we're very much questioning about that at the moment. So we're working with everyone on that. Probably just a few quick updates about the legacy of the Olympics that will have an impact for you in terms of circulation, infrastructures, and everything. So two main issues, and Tim talked about it before this webinar. So the limited traffic zone, the ZTL, as we say, actually, we don't know the perimeter yet. It has not been completely strictly decided, but it will be probably only on the center of Paris, so arrondissement 1, 2, 3, 4, and there is a question mark for instance for the 5 and 6 one, but probably not, and it will be anyway postponed after the 2024 games. So it hasn't been announced officially, but I can certify that will be the case. It will be probably between October and December 2024. The main thing about this limited traffic zone is the coaches won't be able to circulate in this area no longer, except for school buses for the moment, with the exception to the access to the Louvre car park, which will be possible. You will have a possibility probably to book in advance a place, a car park, which is great because it doesn't exist at the moment. And we're just in the process of on an ongoing consultation about that and the exact circulation of coaches. But that are the basic principles that are decided for this zone, and I doubt that we come back on that. Then you've got the Paris low emission zone, which has been announced to be postponed after the 2024 games. That will be probably early January 2025. And it's at the metropolitan level, decided on metropolitan, and it's a condition of access to the Critère 3 vehicle, just beneath the Critère 3 vehicle, able to circulate in the zone and the metropolitan and circulate into the zone. And that will be probably in place early January 2025. Then that the ambition of the Olympics is really to be sustainable. So we haven't built so many venues. We're really in a look at reduction in carbon footprint. So everything that we do for the games is really in that goal. And so just a quick overlook about the new infrastructures, because they are very small of them. But the Adidas Arena, a new arena, Porte de la Chapelle in the north of Paris. Saint-Denis is really the key place for building some new centers like the Aquatics Olympic Center and the Olympic Village. That will be after that. Some residencies, so that will be transformed, and it has been thought according to the goal for afterwards. So that's very important also for us. And then that was also the opportunity of some refurbishment, like the Grand Palais. You know, it's been closed since 2021, and that will be reopening in 2024 for the Olympics. Same for everything about the surroundings of the Tour Eiffel, of the Eiffel Tower, sorry. Everything about the Seine River. You know, this is really the goal of the Olympics, to be able to swim in the Seine River. So hopefully it will happen, because some how would you say, épreuve, sports, I don't know, sport championship. I don't, well.
Competitions.
How would you say?
Competitions.
Competition, sport competition. Well, swimming competition will be held in the Seine for the Olympics. And then there is a refurbishment project for the Champs-Élysées beginning early 24 for the first trimester for the terraces and everything to be really the most beautiful avenue in the world. So I think it will happen. So that will give also the city probably a new look and feel. And of course, we're also working on transportation. You know that cycling, biking is really at the heart of the city policy. So we created quite a lot of new cycling paths. We've got some new parking lots for that, new ways of circulating in the city, and probably for those who haven't been in the city for a few months or years, you will see that it has changed quite a lot on that. So that's very interesting. Same for the public transportation. So new lines, new extensions, with more linked, I would say, with the heart of Paris and the suburbs, which is very important for us also, and everything about ticketing. So Île-de-France Mobilité is really working hard on that, how we can have some easier ticketing available in station, dematerialization, etc., and accessibility, which is also at the heart of our thoughts, actually, welcoming, of course, the Paralympics. So that's really important also for us from transportation, but not only, because we're working also with the hotels, with the museum sites, etc., just to be sure that they are all accessible and that we approach the 100% accessible, even if it's not exactly the case, but that would be. For us, I would say the priorities is really dedicated to the local activities and to improving the visitor experience, which will be a legacy for afterwards, of course. So we're working on a hospitality manifesto. As I was saying, hospitality is really in the heart of our actions, actually. So the idea is really to work collectively with all the tourism actors in Paris and in the region, to be sure that we defend the same values, that we host correctly the big events. So Olympics will be the first one, but afterwards, to be sure that we are carrying the great values like sustainability, but also accessibility, as we were saying, everything about having enhancing the experience of the visitors, be sure that we're digitally also on the right move. And so we're really working on that. You will have a new web app, which exists actually, My Paris Je t'aime, with a specific version for accessible with handicap, My Paris Je t'aime handicap, which you've got an example on the right of the screen, but the idea is really to use a map and be sure that we cover all the local geolocalization around you, and be sure that we recommend what's necessary around you. So local artisan, for example, but local housing, local restaurants, sustainable restaurants, everything about accessibility and everything. So happy to show you that, but that will be probably a tool which will be very interesting for you guys afterwards. And on that, we're developing a B2B services like a booking platform and catalog, which are available in Greater Paris with a dedicated team and customer service, which will be completely dedicated for you also. Also, and I was there this morning, but the Spot 24 location, so it's new attraction being held for all the year 2024. It's an Olympic exhibition on sports and urban culture. It will be our new tourism office also for visitors. but it's the only Olympic exhibition that will be held with a CIO. And so we're working with the Olympic Museum on that. And it's completely fully dedicated to new disciplines, the 6 new disciplines, you know, like the skate, the breaking, the climbing, the surf, basket 3-3 and everything. And so this is really a way of having the urban culture that's very important in Paris and in the region at the heart of the Olympic ecosystem, and show how it impacts all the youth and all the territory actually. So we'll be happy to show you how it will be. It will be open probably currently in November 2023 till the end of December 2024, so after the Olympics. And so probably, as I was saying, just a quick probably food for thoughts about what's going to be prepared for you also in terms of preparation and very pragmatic question on the territory for this period. Hotel inventory, as I was saying, no issue probably on the occupation rate, but there will be a change in December 2023 because Paris 2024 has preempted quite a lot of rooms. So we don't know yet if they will empty the rooms and release them or not. So that will be probably a change in January 2024. We've got an issue about pricing. So we're working actually with all the hotels to be sure that they release their empty rooms actually as soon as possible so you can book, because we know there is an issue actually on booking. And second, to be sure that they don't exaggerate in terms of fares. So we recommend, I would say, a ratio of 1.6 to 1.8 or something like that on the prices actually. But definitely we want to avoid the, you know, multiplication by 10 or something like that, which happens sometimes. And so this is something that we're going to carry on in terms of voice and speaking with the hotels and everything. So that will be the work and the job that we're going to do in the next couple of weeks. So to be sure that we can answer the demand on that. Road circulation, that will be an issue for sure. You know, we have Olympic routes and perimeters around the Olympic venues. So we're still waiting for the condition of using these routes and the kind of security that we will have around the venues. The idea is really to make the most of it, so everything will be opened as we can, with obviously some security measures that we have to take. We will have everything about that before the end of the year. So I would say that the general public communication will be early 2024. And we will be able to tell you exactly how it will work. So how you can access which zone and how it will work. But if you see the different red zone that you have here, this is the zone where it will be the most difficult places just to circulate during the Olympics. And it will probably begin a little before the Olympics, so probably before the beginning of the summer. And for some things, probably early in April or May. For example, at the Concorde in the heart of Paris, they will be in setup since probably May. So we will have all this information before the end of the year, and we'll be able to share it with you, of course, because we know this is a key thing for you, just to anticipate how it will work. Same for the opening ceremony. So we're waiting for the security perimeter, but of course it will be quite big, as it will take into account all the building around the Seine and with the view on the Seine. And so same, we will have, I'm sorry, I don't have more precise information yet, but before the end of the year, we will know exactly the perimeter, but you can be sure that it will be something which will be probably impacting the zone and the global zone in a big one, in big sense, probably at least 2 weeks or 3 weeks before, because of a security measure. The other thing is probably you know about that, but we will have a lot of celebration into Paris. La Villette, of course, is the heart of the ecosystem with the Club France, but we also have the Hôtel de Ville, and every quarter, every neighborhood has its own celebration, organized with the city of every neighborhood. So that means the idea is really to have some fan zone everywhere with the TV set up, and then celebrations, parties, and everything. So of course, it will impact the destination in terms of circulation and everything, but it will be at the same time a great celebration all over Paris. So that will be probably a great time just to see a Paris which is different, with also the nightlife and everything that you can discover at the same time. So that would be a great way of discovering Paris also, especially for the people who hasn't tickets. As I was saying in introduction, 12 million of people coming. It's essentially for that, for the celebrations. So circulating into Paris by every way possible, just to discover all the things. I made it quick and short. I speak quickly, but at your disposal to just answer any question. I will probably quit that, so that will be easier just to answer everyone.
Well, that was a lot of very valuable information, Corinne. And just to reassure everyone, we can share the presentation. So if you are madly scribbling notes, we can save your pencil, because we will share that information. Before I pass on to Tom for some reflections, a couple of points of clarification from me, and also I'd like to address some of the questions that have appeared in the Q&A. One clarification question. So I'm going to talk about coach access and hotels, Corinne, because, you know, certainly from an operator's perspective, those are definitely top of the list. So I think it's encouraging and reassuring that the reduced traffic zone, the ZTL, that will not be introduced until the last part of next year. That's certainly relief from a planning perspective. But can I just clarify one question which has arisen, which is, if you have a service that takes place within that zone, so you know, you're staying in a hotel, it's a group, they've got luggage, is it possible to go to the hotel, but you just need to prove that you have a booking at the hotel? How will that work for accessing services? Fully understand that the main purpose is to prevent Paris being a transiting zone, and that was part of the thinking behind the traffic reduction. But if people have services booked within the restricted area, do they have to prove it? Is there a sort of permit system? I know the details may not be ready, but can you give us a general idea of how that would work?
It hasn't been decided yet. So, for instance, we were more on the principle that no coach can enter the zone, whatever the destination is. But we're actually working with a representative of the coaches, and we are, as tourism representative, I would say, trying to get a way of permitting the entering the zone if you have a proof of course, a destination which is clearly identified, like a hotel, whatever, and probably a park. You know, a car park lot, so
yeah.
Reservation, for example. So, but it hasn't been decided yet. So that will be probably the purpose of the next consultation that we have before the end of the year. And I hope that we will have some information, more detailed information, beginning of the year.
Right. And I just want to share with the audience that we're also collaborating closely with our friends in Paris, because getting operator insight into what would happen if this was the new system in terms of people's plans for booking services within the restricted area, that's useful information to feed into the consultation. So once we're sure we're presenting the possible scenarios accurately, and Corinne's been very helpful correcting our perception of what's going to happen, then we will share that more widely with our operator community to help Paris understand what the various options impact would be. But certainly from our perspective, it's going to have a wide impact on the MICE business as well as leisure, because it's certainly the case that there's plenty of services enjoyed by both MICE and leisure within the restricted zone. So great to know there's more consultation happening, and you're not missing any information out there in the world if you don't know what's happening, because it's not yet being decided. So that's it for coaching. On hotels, a lot of questions in the chat, and I think we've heard you say that some inventory should be released in December, that you're in consultation with hotels about perhaps not being too elevated with the rates during the period, but clearly it's a commercial market. You're not in a position to dictate. But from a practical perspective, I'm just summarizing some of the points in the questions. There are, people are being asked for 100% deposits. They're being, so from a planning perspective, that's from a cash flow perspective, that's more or less impractical. So the bookings won't happen. But I suppose the question is, how should an operator consider? Should they just continue to wait and see? So there'll be more information in December. Then the hotel market may relax a bit, because I noticed from your initial presentation of, as it were, remaining capacity, and I'm sure David will come back to it, if my maths is right, in one scenario, there might be as much as 46% sort of still left, and in the higher scenario, maybe 25% left. And I think the market's really curious to know at what point hotels will, and this may be where the comparable point for London is, hotels will start to go, well, look, there's plenty of normal business that we'd like to take that wants to pay relatively normal prices. At what point is that market going to start working more normally? I'm sure Tom will get into that. But just to summarize the questions, so do we have to wait to book hotels for foreign travelers? How's demand doing compared to forecasts? What would you recommend groups operators to do? So if I can summarize all of that, if you've got any reflections on that, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but if you'd like to share any thoughts before I turn over to Tom, that would be great. Thank you.
I can't decide for each hotel, but in fact, the goal is really, and it's in accordance with all syndicates of hotels and everything. So we all in an agreement on that, which is important. So we're going to really explain to the hotels how it was in London, and maybe you can confirm after me, but the occupation rate in London was less than a usual summer because people had some increased prices and finally they didn't rent the rooms. So the way we want to address the hotels actually is just to tell them how it happened before and to be cautious about that, not too high prices. And moreover, I think there are two levels of information that you need to know. There is this release in December of Paris 2024, but honestly, I'm trying to get the information, but I don't know yet if they're going to release a lot of rooms or not. But on the other hotels, we've got a lot of hotels actually not putting their rooms on the market because they're just waiting for someone to take all the hotels or things like that. But it won't happen again. That's too late already. So this is the purpose of the next couple of weeks, just to tell that to the hotel, show them that they have to take the business now, as you have some demands, and that they have to put and release the rooms that they have at a normal price just to get the business, because if they don't, they won't have any business because you won't wait. So this is really probably, I would say, the 2 months before the end of the year, which are key for that. So I would say before the end of the year, it should be set up. If not, I'm not sure that it will be, because people won't release the rooms or whatever after, and they would prefer probably to close or whatever, because it won't be the right business.
Thank you. There's quite a lot of operational questions there. Thank you for all of them. We're keeping them. I do want to give Tom a chance to offer some reflections on what Corinne said in general. He'll say a bit more once David's made a presentation, and then we'll get to some of the more detailed questions, time permitting. So, Tom.
Wow. Firstly, Corinne, that was just fantastic. Really detailed and really thoughtful and really very, fascinating. I mean, it's great to see someone go into an Olympic Games having really thought about how it's going to work and how it's going to function. I think one of the great news, and this is just to do with Paris, is that they're not building any new or very many new venues. One of the more depressing things about watching an Olympic Games is seeing hugely expensive buildings go up whose only purpose is to serve an Olympic Games. And when the Olympic Games is over, they sit there like white elephants. And this is a feature of a lot of Olympic destinations. This is being avoided in Paris, and not just because it's a green thing to do or an environmentally friendly thing to do. It's just an extremely sensible thing to do. I also, I'm fascinated by a lot of what you've got to say. Just to go back onto the hotel point, it's very interesting that virtually no destination has got it right so far. And it's because it's a very difficult thing to guess. All I would say is that our research showed that no Olympic city prior to London sold more than 20,000 rooms a night to foreign visitors and the Olympic community. So the sort of core demand for incoming people wanting to go to events or to take part in the surrounding events, and very much the corporate surrounding events, was about 20,000 rooms a night, general capacity. It fluctuates according to the destination. If you can get in and out of a destination like Athens, people tend to drop in and then depart very quickly. You can't do that in Sydney or Beijing, for example. You have to invest a considerable amount of time to stay there. But in broad terms, 20,000 is a kind of ceiling for hotel demand, we thought. And what I'm really fascinated by is this idea that you're going to get people coming to Paris to experience Paris during the Games. I think this is a really interesting idea. It's not one, it's partly one that was killed in London. London is not Paris, but if you recall, London did everything in its power to keep people away from London because they were so convinced they were going to have millions of people there. The then mayor, if only he'd stayed in that job, Boris Johnson, was being broadcast on the tube saying up to 2 million extra people who are going to be in London do not come into work. And so they did a very successful job of clearing everyone out. But I mean, I just think it's a wonderful idea that you're going to get these foreign visitors coming in without tickets and coming to enjoy the buzz of the Games. And I think this is quite exciting.
And
I think
there's quite a lot of domestic visitors, I think you said, Corinne, who'd be coming without tickets. And maybe we'll get into the I think you characterize some of the new attractions around the Eiffel Tower. So the buzz that Tom was describing, you know, there's more stuff to do next year that doesn't involve having a ticket to an event in particular.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think I'm just conscious of time, and I know David's probably got about 10 minutes worth of presentation. So Tom, do you have any other sort of broader reflections?
I think let David get on with it, please.
Yeah, okay. So more to come on the operational stuff and general reflections, but like to invite David to give his presentation because we've got some evidence as to what happens, and David's the man to walk us through it.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. So hopefully you are all seeing the slides.
That looks good, David. Thank you.
Lovely. So as we have said, none of us has a crystal ball. We cannot foretell what is going to happen next year. We live in a decade where the unexpected just keeps on happening. And we've also said earlier that London and Paris are certainly not identical as cities go, but they have distinct similarities in terms of where they are on the globe, and that they are both well-known destinations for international tourists. So it makes sense to look back at what actually happened back in 2012 when London hosted the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And the focus here is very much on tourism impacts. Now, major events have a wide range of impacts, and they are, of course, both positive and negative. Some tend to only focus on the positive, but both domains exist. Some impacts are felt well before the event, many during the event, and others not until much later. Impacts can, of course, be on the economy. They can be on civic pride, on people's participation, on their willingness to volunteer. There's impacts on the environment, on infrastructure, and on both domestic and international media sentiment. But the analysis that I'm sharing on these next few slides is temporally and sectorally narrow. We're just looking at 2012, and we're just looking at indicators that relate to tourism performance during that year. So let's dive in by, first of all, looking at the year-on-year change in inbound visits during the July to September 3 months in 2012. On the left-hand side, we are looking at what happened in London, and then on the right-hand side, what happened out with London. So what we can see is that holiday traffic from inbound markets was 12% lower in London in those crucial 3 months than had been the case the year before. Business tourism, that was broadly flat. Visits to friends and relatives, well, that was slightly down, but broadly in line with what had happened the year before. Looking outside of London, we can also see that holiday traffic was down quite substantially in that quarter. Business tourism flat, visits to friends and relatives slightly down. And if we look at a really long time series from 1980 right through to 2019, there's only been one occasion when there were fewer inbound holiday visits in quarter 3 than in quarter 2, and that was in 2012. Now, London has a number of airports, of course, but Heathrow is the main airport for certainly long-haul visitors. So what we're looking at on this slide is passenger traffic at Heathrow Airport each month of 2012 compared with the same month of the year before. And we can see that there was growth in the early months of the year, there was growth in the last few months of the year. But what we can also see is that in the crucial month of July, then demand definitely was down at Heathrow. If we look at annual visits to visitor attractions, what we can see is that London was fairly flat across the entirety of the year. The rest of England was slightly down, whereas places quite far from London, Northern Ireland and Scotland, there, in fact, there was quite an increase in visits to attractions. Now, London is home to very many different sorts of visitor attraction. And let's look at what happened in each month of 2012 in terms of the number of visits to what are called the national museums in London. So these are things like the Tate and the British Museum and the National Gallery. So the real big museums and galleries whose clientele tend to be international visitors. So again, we can see that in some months of 2012, there were more visits to these museums and galleries than had been the case the year before. But again, in those core summer months, we can see some quite distinct declines. There's quite a spike there in April, and the explanation for that is, in fact, that it was the wettest April on record in London. And it was probably a case that people who were in London just wanted to take shelter. But meanwhile, we can also look at some evidence from the retail sector. And data from Experian shows that the number of shoppers in central London was substantially down on the day of the opening ceremony, and indeed the following day. And it was at the start of the next working week where the bigwigs all got together and thought, crikey, those messages that we were broadcasting about all these extra people, maybe we need to change the tone of those messages because they were perhaps being far too successful. Now let's have a look at annual change in domestic overnight holidays in the whole of England. So again, there is variability across the year, and over a long period of time now, domestic holiday taking in England has been broadly stable. But once again, we can see July was not a very good month for domestic holiday taking in that year. And the final slide before we have our discussion looks at accommodation bed space occupancy in England in each month of 2012 compared with 2011. So 2011 is the red bars and 2012 the blue bars. So we can see that by and large, most months in 2012, bed space occupancy was not that dissimilar across the 2 years, but across the whole of England, we can see that there was this 5 percentage point decrease in bed space occupancy in July. And were we to look at London, what we would see is that there was an 11 percentage point reduction in bed space occupancy in July 2012 compared with July 2011. Now, none of this means that this is what will happen next year in Paris, of course, because time has moved on. It is a different city. but hopefully it's quite a useful run through of some of the data relating to what happened in London and the rest of the UK back in 2012. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen.
David, as usual, that was extremely clear and informative. Thank you. We've got about 15 minutes. I know Tom's got some more remarks in general. I just want to characterize for everyone's benefit the questions we've got, and we'll see what we have time for. So forgive me if I don't read out your exact question. I'm trying to characterize the kinds of things people are asking about. And I think some of them are topics which we do have a reasonable answer to. One category of question is, where are we going to find information about what's open and when? And I think, Corinne, from your perspective, I mean, we're very happy to share links, but there will be some quite sophisticated information available as to what's open, you know, where particular launch events are happening. So both the standard, you know, is the Louvre going to be open, etc., but also where will the special events and the launch events take place? Your website is going to be the place to look, from what I understand. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, you will have two. Well, the major source of information will be parisjetem.com. So you can, of course, check it out, and we will be on the edge of every information, as we are already on every time. So I would say you can already check it. And the web app, myparisjetem.com, will be also some great source of information once you're on their territory. So once you're here, if the visitors is just going to the web app, we'll have everything about everything open and everything. But again, to information, this ecosystem, digital ecosystem, will be linked with the Paris 2024. So we will have a real net linking between both of us, so that would be easier, and the city of Paris. And for the other thing, the purpose is really to make everything open. So I would say, except probably if you are exactly in the perimeter, which is a red perimeter, the most secure one, just for the time of the competition. For the other ways, it will be open. So it will probably only be closed for a few hours or something. And even if, I'm not sure of that, because the purpose is really to leave everything open as wide as we can, in fact.
Yeah. And perhaps just to add, because I know your colleagues will be at our event in London on the 3rd of November, you know, B2B distribution is definitely something that destinations are taking a closer interest in. So availability is often a bigger problem than price. You know, can we get inventory, under what conditions? So I'd encourage people to connect with Paris Je T'aime in respect of some B2B distribution options as well, to understand. There are one or two technical questions which there may be a quick answer to. So if I may, I'll just quickly go through those, because if you do have the answer, it'd be great. Do you know if VTC, or private car companies in English, will have the same rights of circulation as Taxi Parisien?
I know they won't.
They will not. Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
I don't know exactly what will be the difference, but of course the taxi has some permit for circulation on some routes and everything, which won't have a VTC at the moment.
Okay, so I think what we've heard is there's going to be a very sophisticated information ecosystem, and that's great. But just going back to one of David's key points, that, you know, there was less occupancy during the period of the Olympics. That's going to be making some operators listening grind their teeth, because they can't get hotel space. So there appears to be a paradox in operation, which, without wanting to turn this into an intellectual debate, is curious, given the evidence we've had. So, Tom, I've got a feeling that's going to resonate with you. Given what we've heard so far, any further reflections?
I actually don't have much more to say. I think that David's one, it was very comprehensive on the London thing. I would just emphasize, as he emphasized too, that this is, you know, no indication of what is going to happen in Paris. Something completely different would happen in Paris. I would say that it would be extremely unusual for a destination hosting an Olympic Games not to think that there was going to be an upside on hotel rates. It is absolutely normal for hotels to think this. I think they're wrong. As I've said, I don't think that the core demand, which is about 20 to 25,000 bedrooms from the foreign supporters and the wider Olympic family, that doesn't begin to compensate for the people who actually think if there's an Olympic Games on in Paris, this is probably not the time to spend a week looking at the attractions of Paris, because there's an Olympic Games on. So it has a sort of deadening effect on that point. So we shall see what the hotels do. I think it's going to be a little bit late for some of the core long haul markets, whose brochures, for instance, are already out now. So I mean, if you're looking at Anglophone or even Japanese markets, their product is already on the shelves. So, but for short haul markets, there's plenty to fight for, definitely. I'm going to hand it back to you, Tim. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And I was reflecting, David, that the national museums you were describing in London, I think I'm right in saying were still free of charge in 2012.
Indeed, yeah. They've been free of charge since 2002, so that was normal, and I think that is perhaps one of a very telling slide, that one.
Yeah, it is. So Paris, in general, not free of charge, and we know that visitor flow management is now part of the stock in trade of attraction management as well. So I think the information quality about what is going to be available when for those who are still going to be bringing clients to Paris during the period affected by the Olympics and the Paralympics, it is, just judging by the questions we're receiving, a critical question, but really unrelated to the Olympics as well, how we do distribution of particularly the most popular attractions. And there's various different channels to market. So if you're a consumer, where do you look? But in the case of this webinar in particular, if you're a B2B buyer and you want to, can I realistically promise access to those key attractions? I think, Corinne, what I'm hearing is stay tuned to the information that's going to be available. But from what David's saying, those attractions shouldn't necessarily be thinking that they're going to get a lot of extra business, because as you were saying, Corinne, you're not necessarily anticipating extra cultural visitors, that the people who are arriving to Paris from provincial France to just enjoy the atmosphere are going to be doing more outdoor things, enjoy themselves. They're not necessarily going to be looking at paintings so much. So yeah. I think any further reflections from you on that, Corinne, thinking about the B2B operators looking to plan, as it were, normal cultural tourism, how should they approach next year?
Yeah, completely aligned with what has been said about London and what David said. So we are completely aligned with this figure. So we don't expect an extra attendance for that. But we already have our team, our B2B team, that will be, which will be at GEM, for instance, has already secured some tickets and everything for the major attractions. So we're working with On Location for the hospitality packages, but we also have some that we can, of course, sell or whatever, and pre-sell already from now. So that I think it will be okay in terms of availability, and we will have a network to do it and to ensure it. But again, that will probably not be the highest demand at that time, just for the July and August period.
That's clear. David, any further thoughts on you in terms of what you've had, or if you were, as it were, doing your old job, thinking about Paris, what sorts of things would you be monitoring as 2024 unfolds?
Well, I think, as both you and Tom indicated earlier, it is a delight to hear and watch Corinne's presentation in terms of the common sense that is clearly already being adopted in terms of understanding what might be the range of implications that this has on different aspects of the visitor economy ecosystem. So I think just being realistic and preparing for it to be different to a normal year is the best advice that can be given.
Well, that's very pragmatic advice. And I mean, as Tom says, it's going to be too late for long haul markets, and so there will be a drop in demand during that period. But there's plenty to play for in the domestic and the proximity markets, and we certainly saw during 2012 there was a lot of sort of reasonably late activity where people realized, hang on a second, there's plenty of cheap hotels going in London. What happened? So no doubt something similar on that line will happen. But I think your overall message of hospitality, Corinne, I think is also being reflected in the very thorough approach you're taking to engage with us as the industry. And I'd really like to thank you for such a thorough and detailed job on that front. And we look forward to continuing our collaboration with you as the Olympics proceed and as we get to next year. I think, Tom, I saw a little indication you might want to jump in.
I do beg your pardon. I had a sudden loss of power, so I had to use an emergency device. I just wanted to stress that Paris is Paris. It's one of the greatest cities on earth, obviously. And this is 2024, not 2012. And it's one of the great cities, and it's not being run by Boris Johnson. So it's got everything going for it that London didn't have.
All right. Well, Boris Johnson is very welcome to join the webinar if he'd like to defend his record during that period. But we will be sharing this on our website for those of you who've got colleagues who would like to tune in. We're going to stop a few minutes early because I think we've addressed the questions. There are more detailed ones to do with driver licenses and so forth, but I've got a note of those and I'll make sure that our website will reflect the updated information. So what happens to everyone who registered for these webinars is we will send you a link to the recording, and with your permission, Corinne, we will also share the presentation as well. And if there are specific questions which we can add or we can address on our website, there is a city access page on our website which gives information, usually linking to official sources like those provided by Paris Je t'aime. So plenty still to discover in coming months. And I think we've heard loud and clear that there's going to be more information before the end of the year. And I know that on the 18th of October, Corinne, there's the next Comité de Conjonction, I think, so the contact group, where all the various stakeholders will be sharing information, and we will see if more information will follow after that. So we will stay closely tuned. I'd like to thank Corinne very much for her detailed presentation, Tom and David for adding their reflections, and to you, the audience, and your questions. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.